What happens when a CEO walks into his own restaurant and nearly eats something that could land a customer in the hospital? Victor O'Neill didn't grow up flipping burgers or mopping floors. He grew up in boardrooms. His father had built their fast casual restaurant chain from scratch, and when he passed, Victor had inherited all 16 locations. But lately, something didn't sit right. Sales were flat. Customer complaints were up. His district managers blamed it on inflation, staffing shortages, or just one bad location. But Victor had learned something over the years: problems don't start at the top, they start on the floor. So he shaved his beard, dyed his hair dark brown, and covered his tattoos. A pair of thick glasses and an old baseball cap completed the look. The corporate office had never sent him out to this location personally, and the staff here had turned over completely since his father's days. Nobody would recognize him. He signed up as a new kitchen trainee under the name Nick. This was Store 8, one of the oldest locations. It had a decent location off the interstate, but had been getting hit with complaints about slow service and poor food quality. Victor wanted to see it for himself. He arrived early, just before the breakfast shift. The manager, a guy named Darren, looked up from behind the counter. "You the new kitchen hire?" Darren asked, not even making eye contact. "Yes, sir, Nick." Darren gave him a once-over. "You look older than most guys we get," Victor smiled slightly. "Just trying something new," Darren shrugged. "Whatever, go see Chris in the back. He's the morning chef. He'll get you started." Victor headed to the back kitchen, where a man in his mid-40s was already cracking eggs and flipping bacon. Chris, the chef. He had a wiry build and eyes that darted around like he was always on edge. "You the new guy?" Chris asked, tossing a spatula onto the grill. "You clean?" Victor blinked. Yeah, clean. Like drugs, you clean," Chris said, lowering his voice. Victor nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm clean." Chris gave a dry laugh. "Good. Last guy was high half the time, burned a whole tray of biscuits and didn't even notice." Victor forced a chuckle. Yikes. The first hour passed quietly. Victor helped prep vegetables, watched how orders came in, and took mental notes. The kitchen was small but manageable. He noticed Chris rarely checked the labels on the food. Things got thrown into pans without a second look. "Hey," Chris said, holding up a bag of shredded cheese. "Smell this." Victor sniffed. It smelled sour, almost like milk gone bad. "Still good?" Chris asked. Victor hesitated. "I don't think so, man. That smells off," Chris scoffed. "It's cheese. It always smells like feet." "We're not throwing it out." He dumped it into the skillet anyway. Victor's stomach turned. 2 hours later, a delivery came in. Chris signed for it without checking the invoice. Victor asked, "Shouldn't we check the dates?" Chris waved him off. "You're not corporate." "Don't worry about it." Victor didn't argue, but he took a photo of the invoice when Chris wasn't looking. The chicken thighs listed were already 4 days past the sell-by date. He stepped out for a break and sat on an upside-down milk crate behind the building. He pulled out his phone and stared at the photo. This wasn't just carelessness. This was dangerous. Back inside, a young server named Fiona Vance came in for her shift. She moved quickly, greeted every guest with a warm smile, and even picked up a spill in the lobby without being asked. Victor watched as she pulled Chris aside. "Hey, Chris, table 6 says their chicken smells weird." Chris rolled his eyes. "Tell them it's smoked." "They said it smells like it's gone bad," Chris shrugged. "Then offer him a salad." Fiona looked uncomfortable. "Shouldn't we comp it?" Chris turned to her sharply. "Do you want to pay for the waste out of your tips?" Fiona flinched. "No, I just okay." She walked off, clearly upset. Victor had seen enough. He walked over to the grill, pulled the pan of sizzling chicken off the heat and dumped it in the trash. Chris turned. "What the hell are you doing?" Victor took a slow breath and looked him dead in the eyes. "I'm stopping the service. This food is expired. It's not safe." Chris stepped forward. "You don't get to make that call, trainee." Victor pulled off his glasses and cap. "I do when I own the place." The kitchen froze. Fiona dropped the cup she was holding. Chris blinked. "Wait, what?" "I'm Victor O'Neill," he said. "My father started this company." You've been serving expired ingredients, ignoring food safety, bullying staff, and putting customers at risk, Chris stammered. I didn't know, don't, Victor said, voice low. You knew. He turned to Darren, who had just walked in, confused. Shut it down, Victor said. Right now. Darren looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. He nodded and walked out to lock the doors. Victor faced Chris again. You're done here. Clean out your locker. You're lucky I don't report you to the health department. Chris opened his mouth, then closed it. He stormed out. Victor turned to Fiona, who was still staring at him in shock. You okay? She nodded slowly. Yeah, just didn't expect that. Thank you for speaking up, Victor said. That took guts. She gave a small smile. I just didn't want anyone to get sick, Victor nodded. That's exactly the kind of person we need more of. And he meant it. Victor stood near the back door, arms crossed, as the last few customers were politely guided out by Darren. The front lights dimmed. A tense silence hung over the dining area. Fiona leaned against the service counter, her hands still slightly trembling. Darren returned, eyes darting between her and Victor, unsure where to stand. Victor kept his voice measured. Who else knew about the expired product? Darren hesitated. I mean, I don't check the inventory myself. That's kitchen's responsibility. Victor's expression didn't change. And who's responsible for holding the kitchen accountable? Darren looked away. I guess that would be me. Victor stepped past him without another word and headed into the walk-in cooler. Fiona followed without being asked, pulling her sweater sleeves down tightly. Inside, the cooler was cramped but well-stocked. Victor scanned the shelves. Some items looked fine. Others had mold starting to edge around the lids. A container of raw shrimp sat half open, unsealed. The smell was unmistakable. He lifted the container and turned to Fiona. How long has this been in here? I don't know, she said quietly. I don't handle the seafood. Victor placed it carefully back on the shelf and pulled out his phone. He took photos of the timestamp labels, then turned and walked out. No one spoke as he passed through the kitchen again. He turned to Darren. Corporate health audit is happening this week. I'll be back with a team. If the cooler's not cleaned and inventory corrected by then, you'll be out. Darren gave a stiff nod, jaw tight. Understood. Victor looked at Fiona. You're not scheduled to leave yet, are you? No, I've got another 5 hours. He gestured toward the dining room. Grab a seat. You're not working until we reopen. But I'm hourly, she said, unsure. If I'm not on the floor, you'll be paid every minute you're here. Go sit down. She hesitated, then nodded and walked to a booth. Victor turned to Darren. Is there a clean pot of coffee? Darren blinked. Probably not. Then make one. Victor grabbed a pen and receipt pad from the counter and sat across from Fiona. He tapped the pen once against the notepad, then looked up. Tell me everything. Fiona swallowed. About what? About what it's like to work here. I don't want general answers. I want your day. Start at the beginning. She looked down at her hands. I usually get here 20 minutes early. I like to get set up before the rush. He didn't interrupt. I clock in, check my section, wipe down menus. Sometimes I have to prep the drinks station because the night crew forgets. Then I take the first table. I try to greet people fast. I hate making them wait. Victor nodded once. Do you get help from the others? She hesitated. Depends who's on. Some shifts, yeah, others, not really. Who doesn't help? She looked uncomfortable. I don't want to cause trouble. If something's wrong, I need to know. She took a breath. Sasha, she's been here longer. She usually stays on her phone in the back. If I ask her to run food, she says it's not her section. Victor wrote something on the pad. Do the managers step in? Only if a customer complains. But they don't see what happens behind the counter. She's careful when they're nearby. Victor kept writing. And tips, are they shared? Not officially. We're supposed to keep our own. But if someone helps with a big table, we usually split it. Does she help? Fiona shook her head. No, but she's taken tips off tables that weren't hers. I've seen it. Victor's eyes narrowed. When was the last time? Last weekend, table 9. They left cash. She walked by and grabbed it before I got there. Victor made a mark on the paper. Who was the manager on shift? Darren. He didn't look up. Did you tell him? I tried. He said unless I saw her take it, he couldn't do anything. Victor finally looked at her. And what do you think? Fiona met his eyes. I think he doesn't want to deal with Sasha. From the kitchen, the sound of a coffee machine kicking on echoed through the space. Victor stood up and walked to the back. Darren, call Sasha, tell her to come in now. Darren frowned. She's not on till tomorrow. I didn't ask when she was scheduled. Darren picked up his phone reluctantly. Fiona stayed seated, hands folded on the table, watching the door. Victor returned 10 minutes later with 2 coffees. He slid one across to her. You've been here how long? Just over a year. No raises, she shook her head. No recognition, she laughed softly. Not unless you count getting yelled at for clocking out 1 minute late. Victor leaned back. You thinking about quitting? Every week. But I need the job. The front door swung open. A woman in her mid-20s walked in, phone in hand, eyes locked on the screen. She didn't look up until she reached the counter. What's the emergency? She asked, annoyed. Victor stood. You're Sasha? Yeah. Who are you? He stepped forward slightly. Victor O'Neill, she blinked. Like the owner? Yes, she crossed her arms. Okay, but why am I here? I'm not even on the clock. Victor gestured toward Fiona. Sit. Sasha looked between them. Is this about her? Sit. She dropped into the booth with an exaggerated sigh. Victor looked at her squarely. Were you working last weekend? Yeah. Did you take tips from tables you didn't serve? What? No. Victor didn't blink. You sure? Yeah. I mean, maybe someone left cash and I thought it was mine. It's busy. People make mistakes. He turned to Fiona. Same table. Fiona nodded. Victor turned back. I'm not here to arbitrate tip disputes. I'm here because I've heard you refuse to help coworkers, stay on your phone during shifts, and contribute to a toxic work environment. Sasha rolled her eyes. That's just her opinion. Victor's voice was flat. It's not just her. I've been watching the cameras. You've clocked in late 6 times this month. You've spent more minutes off the floor than on it, and you've ignored direct requests for help from both back and front of house. Sasha's composure cracked. Okay, but you can't just... You're done here. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Victor stood. You'll be paid out for your last shift. Your behavior doesn't reflect the standards of this company. Please leave. She stood up slowly, then turned and walked out without another word. Darren reappeared from the kitchen. That really necessary? Victor didn't look at him. You tell me. Darren shifted awkwardly. She's been here a while, that's all. Victor turned. That's not a reason to keep someone who poisons the team. Darren didn't respond. Victor looked back at Fiona. You're working tonight, she nodded. I'll be in the office. If you need anything, come find me. And after your shift, I want your input on how to fix this place. She gave a small, surprised nod. Victor walked to the back office and closed the door. He sat down, pulled out the inventory sheet and started making notes. There were dozens of problems to fix. Staffing, procedures, accountability. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't hearing about them through reports. He was seeing them. And now he could do something about it. Victor sat behind the closed office door, elbows resting on the desk. The soft hum of the refrigerator compressors outside a quiet reminder of just how much had gone unchecked. He flipped through the binder Darren had left behind: scheduling logs, equipment checklists, incident reports. Most of the pages were either incomplete or blank. A few had been hastily backfilled, likely in the last 24 hours. It was an illusion of order, and it collapsed under the smallest amount of scrutiny. He reached for the shift roster and cross-checked it with the time clock punches. That's where the pattern showed itself. Inconsistent coverage during peak hours. Overlapping shifts with no actual overlap. Most damning of all, 2 names appeared repeatedly on early morning prep work, even on days when food quality reports were at their worst. One of those names was Chris. The other was a cook named Luis Romero. Victor stepped out of the office and headed toward the back line. The dining room was still closed, but the lunch prep had resumed. Fiona was mopping near the service station. She gave him a small nod without breaking rhythm. He kept walking. In the kitchen, Louis stood near the fryer, head down, moving with quiet efficiency. He wore headphones around his neck, not in his ears, a small courtesy that caught Victor's attention. Unlike Chris, Louis checked every label before opening a container. His gloves were clean, apron tied properly. When he noticed Victor, he didn't flinch, just gave a dry nod and kept working. "You Louis?" Victor asked. "Yeah, you've been here a while, since before COVID." Victor leaned against the prep table. "You usually work mornings?" "Most days." "I take the prep shift nobody wants." "Why not nights?" Louis paused for a moment. "I've got my daughter in the evenings. Her mom works late." Victor nodded once. "You work with Chris a lot." Louis glanced at him. "Used to, not anymore, I guess." "What was that like?" Louis hesitated. "He cut corners. I'd try to fix stuff when I could." "Why didn't you speak up?" "I did once. Got told to stay in my lane." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" "Darren said it wasn't my job to police the kitchen." Victor didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked over the line. The oven door was slightly ajar and the fryer oil looked clean new even. That wasn't cheap. He turned back to Louis. "Did you change the oil?" "Yeah, it was overdue." Victor checked the clock. "You do that on your own." Louis gave a short shrug. "Didn't want it smoking through lunch." Victor stepped closer. "You did that off the clock." Louis didn't answer. Victor exhaled slowly. "Go take a break. 15 minutes. I'll cover the line." Louis raised an eyebrow. "You know the fryer well enough." "I know it better than I want to." Louis cracked a dry chuckle and peeled off his gloves. "All right, don't burn the fries." As Louis stepped outside, Victor grabbed a set of tongs and dropped a fresh batch of potatoes into the oil. The fryer hissed to life. A few minutes later, he heard Darren's voice behind him. "You really gonna run the line now, too?" Victor didn't turn. "Until I can trust someone else to do it right." Darren walked around to face him. "Look, I know things got sloppy, but you're blowing this out of proportion." Victor kept his eyes on the fryer. "You think serving expired meat and letting employees steal tips is a small problem?" Darren shifted his weight. "That stuff wasn't on me. Chris ran the kitchen. I handled scheduling." Victor turned slowly. "You were the general manager, Darren. Everything that happened here was on you." Darren's jaw tightened. "I kept the place open. I kept people clocked in. You think that's easy when corporate doesn't give us any help?" Victor set the tongs down carefully. "You had help. You just didn't use it." Darren's arms dropped to his sides. "So what now? You replacing me?" "I'm letting you go." Darren blinked. "You're serious?" "You ignored contamination risks, allowed hostile behavior, and dismissed employee concerns. You didn't just fail, you let people get hurt." Darren didn't argue. He just turned and walked out through the back door. Victor watched him go, then turned back to the fryer. The oil bubbled quietly. A few minutes later, Louis stepped back inside, wiping his hands on a paper towel. "You're still here," he said. Victor handed him the tongs. "I'm not trying to take your job." Louis took them with a tired grin. "That's fine, you wouldn't last a week." Victor smiled faintly. "Probably not." He stepped out of the kitchen and headed toward the front. Fiona was now wiping down the condiment station. He waved her over. "You said you were willing to help rebuild this place." She joined him at the counter. "Still am. I need someone to act as a shift lead for now, not a promotion yet. But someone I trust to keep things running while I bring in a new GM." Fiona's eyes widened slightly. "You want me to do that?" "You've earned it." She hesitated. "I've never managed anyone before." "You've already been doing it, quietly. That's how leadership starts." She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do it. First task, write down what you need. Staff, supplies, anything. We start fixing this from the ground up." She grabbed a pen and paper without another word. By mid-afternoon, Victor had called in a compliance officer to begin a full inventory and sanitation review. The restaurant stayed closed for the day. A few regulars knocked on the door, disappointed, but Victor personally stepped outside and explained that they were undergoing maintenance. No one argued. In the evening, he gathered the remaining staff, 5 in total, and met with them in the dining area. No uniforms, no clipboards, just a circle of chairs and a conversation. "I'm going to be honest with you," he began. "This place hasn't been what it should be, and that's my fault." No one spoke. "I trusted bad systems. Let managers run unchecked. That ends now. I'm not here to fire people. I already did that. I'm here to listen and rebuild. But I can't do that unless you tell me what needs fixing. Lewis leaned forward. We need better prep coverage. One person can't do it alone. I'll fix that, Victor said. What else? A young cashier named Jenna spoke up. The registers are outdated. They freeze during lunch rush. Victor nodded. Document every issue. I'll get a tech team in. Another hand went up. A dishwasher named Malik. Scheduling's been a mess. I worked a double last Friday because someone called out and nobody covered. Victor made a note. We'll add a backup list and rotate coverage. No one should be stuck like that again. After nearly an hour, the meeting wrapped. Victor stood stretched and looked around the quiet restaurant. Tomorrow, this place reopens, but it won't be the same. Fiona locked eyes with him. You sure people will come back? They will, as long as we give them a reason to. He turned off the lights and held the door for the last of the staff as they left. Outside, the air was cool. The street lights flickered on, and for the first time in months, the old store didn't feel like a lost cause. It felt like a beginning. The next morning, Victor arrived 2 hours before open. No disguise, no secrecy. The new prep cook he'd hired overnight, Angela, mid-30s. Short sleeves revealing old burns and long experience, was already at the back sink, washing produce with a focused rhythm. She'd worked at a competitor chain for years, and when Victor called with a same-day offer and hazard pay to cover the short notice, she'd said yes before he finished the sentence. Lewis was reviewing the updated stock sheet Fiona had handwritten after her shift. The two of them spoke in low tones, checking the cooler shelf by shelf. The expired containers were gone. The shrimp had been tossed. The cheese had been replaced. There was no shouting, no rushed clatter, just quiet movement, and for the first time, a sense of order returning. Victor joined them at the prep table. How's it looking? Lewis handed over the sheet. We're short on lettuce and we need clean grill pads, but everything else is stocked right. Angela glanced over her shoulder. I can do lettuce now. I cut tight so you get more yield. Victor nodded. Perfect. Let me know if anything's missing. He stepped into the dining area, now reset and wiped down. Fiona was adjusting the table settings. She wore a fresh apron and a radio clipped to her belt, not for show, but because the new communication system had arrived that morning. He'd ordered it himself from regional inventory after Jenna flagged the outdated register problem. The radios were a stopgap, but they'd make coordination easier until the POS installations finished next week. Victor approached the counter where Jenna was testing a tablet interface. Any luck? She tapped through the demo screen. Yeah, this one doesn't freeze. It's not final, but it'll hold. He nodded once. You've got a good handle on this. You ever think about working corporate tech? She looked up. You serious? Dead serious. We need people who have actually touched the equipment. I mean, maybe I'd have to learn more. We'll train you. If you're open to it, I'll set up a shadow day. Jenna smiled, but didn't say anything else. Victor took that as a yes. At 10:59, Victor unlocked the front doors. It didn't take long for word to spread that the location was open again. The first customer was a man in his 60s, wearing a mechanic's uniform and carrying a newspaper tucked under one arm. He'd been here before Victor recognized the way he looked for the corner booth out of habit. Fiona approached him with a clean menu and a practiced calm. Welcome back, we've missed you. The man gave her a tired smile. Heard you had a shake-up, she nodded. We're doing things better now. He opened the menu, then glanced up. Hope so. Last time I almost walked out. Fiona didn't flinch. You'll leave happy today. By noon, 7 tables were filled. The kitchen worked with a steady pulse, no shouting, no missed orders, no substitutions due to spoilage. Lewis called out times with quiet confidence, and Angela moved with precision, tying off prep trays and rotating stock without being asked. Victor stayed out of the way, taking notes from a side booth. He watched how Fiona adjusted the flow, shifting between greeting, checking on tables, and jumping in to run food when needed. She didn't hover. She didn't overcorrect. She just moved like someone who understood what the room needed before anyone had to say it. A couple in their 20s flagged her down. The man wore a trucker hat and the woman had a travel pillow looped around her neck. "Is the chicken fresh today?" the man asked, half joking, half not. Fiona nodded. "Everything's been replaced." "If you're not happy with it, I'll comp it myself." The woman raised an eyebrow. "You're a manager, acting shift lead, but I stand by the food." They ordered and didn't ask again. At the end of the lunch rush, Victor stepped into the back office. Malik, the dishwasher, was waiting there, invited for a quick one-on-one. He sat with his hands on his knees, posture loose but alert. Victor closed the door behind him. "How'd the shift go?" Malik shrugged. "Smoother than usual, no grease fire, nobody yelling. You've been here a while." "Why didn't you leave?" I thought about it, but I kept hoping someone upstairs would see what was happening. "Guess you finally did." Victor sat across from him. "You've got good instincts. I read your notes on the backup schedule idea." Malik looked surprised. "You actually read those? Every line, and I'm going to implement it. Starting next week, everyone gets access to a rotating on-call list. Anyone who covers gets a bonus. No one gets stuck again." Malik nodded once. "Appreciate that." Victor leaned forward. "You ever run a back-of-house team?" Malik raised an eyebrow. "Not officially. Want to learn." Malik didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I do." Victor stood. "We'll build that plan this week. You've earned it." By mid-afternoon, the crowd had thinned. Victor walked the floor, checking in on guests. Compliments were quiet but sincere: hot food, fast refills, no mistakes. No one mentioned the past. They didn't need to. The difference spoke for itself. In the kitchen, Angela wrapped up the prep list and clocked out. She passed Victor on her way out and paused. "This crew's green," she said. "But they listen. That's all you need," he nodded. "You staying on? You paying fair?" "Yes." "Then yeah, I'll stay." She left without fanfare. Victor respected that. Later, as the dinner shift began to trickle in, Victor gathered the day team in the back. Fiona, Lewis, Jenna, Malik, they stood in a loose semicircle, not quite sure if this was a debrief or something else. Victor didn't raise his voice. "I came here because I didn't trust the reports. What I found was worse than I expected. But I also found people who kept this place standing when they had every reason to walk. That matters." No one spoke. He continued. "This isn't a one-day fix. It's going to take weeks to rebuild what was lost, but I'm committing resources, training, and time to make it happen. And I'm starting with you." He turned to Fiona. "Effective immediately, you're officially promoted to assistant manager. You'll get full benefits and a raise." She blinked, stunned. You didn't have to ask. You earned it." He turned to Malik. "You'll start FOH/BOH squad lead training next week. Jenna, I'll schedule your tech shadow day. Lewis, I'll speak with corporate about adding a prep supervisor role. You've been carrying too much alone." Lewis nodded, slow and steady. "Appreciate that." Victor paused. "Last thing. If any of you see something wrong, expired food, unsafe practices, employee mistreatment, I want to hear about it. Directly. No middlemen." Fiona looked around the room. "What if we're not working when it happens?" Victor pulled a card from his pocket. "This is my personal number. You see something, you call me, day or night." Each of them took one. Victor stepped back. "I'm not just fixing a store, I'm fixing the culture, but I can't do it without you." As they filed out, heading back toward the floor or toward home, Victor sat for a moment in the quiet. The hum of the cooler, the clink of dishes, the low murmur of staff voices, it was all ordinary. But for the first time it felt honest. He wasn't undercover anymore. And he didn't need to be. Because now the people who mattered weren't being silenced, they were being heard. And that would be the difference between a restaurant that just stayed open and one that truly came back to life.